Philippines Colonization by Vanessa Grace and Cadence.
Who colonized the Philippines? The Philippines have been colonized many times in history, from countries like Spain, the US, and Japan. The most long-lasted was the Spanish colonial period. This began when the explorer Ferdinand Magellan came to the Philippines in 1521 and claimed it as a colony for the Spanish Empire. The period of this lasted until the Philippine Revolution in 1898. What happened during the Spain colonization period? The people in the Philippines had welcomed the explorer Ferdinand Magellan in, but Lapu-Lapu, who was known as the first hero of the Philippines, had realized something was off with these foreigners and caused a war, which ended in Ferdinand Magellan's death. With the rest of the Spaniard people leaving the islands and heading back home, Spain now knew about the Filipino land and saw the potential of taking it over. Constantly, the Spaniards had come to the Philippines and acted like they wanted peace, but would quickly turn on them to claim their land. During the times of the Spanish conquering the Philippines, the Filipino people had become slaves to their own land. There were many notable heroes like Dr. Jose Rizal and Andres Bonifacio, who at this time had led several rebellions against the colonizers. Finally, on June 12, 1898, the first president of the Philippines waved their flag to signify the end of the oppression from the Spaniards. The effects that the Spaniards had on the Philippines. Lots of the culture was lost from the colonization of Spain, but some of it was never forgotten. There were fundamental changes to the everyday lives of the natives. The Spaniards had introduced their ways of society and forced them on to their religions and customs. The Spanish had brought numerous of their own foods, which drastically changed the cuisine in the Philippines. Lots of traditional names were stripped away and were given Spanish names instead. Today, lots of Tagalog, which is the native language to the Philippines, has a lot of Spanish influence.
The Philippines became a reluctant part of a new empire. When the Spanish-American War ended in December 1898, Spain sold the entire Philippine archipelago to the United States for $20 million. The Philippines had acquired a new colony ruler. The United States had acquired a colony the size of Arizona, located more than 4,000 miles away across the Pacific. The United States had just received control over the ancient Muslim sultanates, still angry about the Spanish takeover centuries prior. More urgently, it confronted a separate Catholic nationalist rebel movement led by Emilio Aguinaldo. War shortly erupted between the nationalists and the American troops stationed in the islands. U.S. armies responded by rounding peasants into reconcentration camps and declaring entire areas battle zones, in which no distinctions were made between combatants and civilians. At least 4,200 Americans and 16,000 Filipino soldiers were thought to have been killed in battle. In the United States, a newly formed anti-imperialist motion protested the war as an act of criminal offense against the Filipino people. Self-described imperialists insisted that America had a duty to bring order and civilization to what Indian Senator Alfred Beveridge called a barbarous race. As the senator demanded, "The Philippines are ours. We will not repudiate our duty in the archipelago. We will not abandon our duty in the Orient. We will not renounce our part in the mission of our race, trustee under God of the civilization of the world." How did the Philippines resist the American colonization? There had been numerous quasi-religious uprisings in the Philippines during the more than 300 years of colony rule. But the late 19th century writings of Jose Rizal and others helped stimulate a more board-based movement for Philippine independence. When did the Philippines stop being an American colony? The time of American colonization of the Philippines was 48 years. It began with a cession of the Philippines to the U.S. by Spain in 1898 and lasted until the U.S. recognition of the Philippine independence in 1946.
On December 8, 1941 to July 5, 1945, the Japanese started to take over the Commonwealth of the Philippines during World War II. Just 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred, the invasion of the Philippines followed. Before Japan's surrender, they spent more than 3 years occupying the Philippines. 60% of the islands, largely in the jungle and mountains, were under the grip of the Philippine resistance forces. They received supplies from MacArthur's submarines as well as officers and reinforcements. The Philippines was such an important part of the process for transporting oil, as well as it was in between Japan and the Dutch East Indies, so this led to Japan targeting the Philippines. Calabapi, Association for Service to the New Philippines, which was organized by the Japanese, was the only political party permitted while the country was under occupation. Most Filipinos maintained their loyalty to the U.S. throughout the occupation and war crimes committed by Empire of Japan soldiers. The Ministry of Education was established by the Japanese-sponsored Republic on October 14, 1943. Tagalog, Philippine culture, and educational practice were only taught to Filipinos during the Japanese occupation. Work ethic and respect for labor were emphasized. Overall, when the war ended, the Philippines had experienced a significant death rate and extreme physical destruction. Around 527,000 Filipinos, including military personnel and civilians, had died from all causes. 131,000 to 164,000 were killed in 72 instances of war crimes.